All right, holiday schmoliday. Let's do this thing.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It is Monday, May 27th, Memorial Day. Matt Roy, Chuck McGinnick on tap. Chuck, you had a semi-late night last night via NASCAR, but you are here bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed once again, and NASCAR on a Sunday night on a holiday weekend with weather delays. Geez, where have I seen that before?
When you've been working in this business at this station for as long as you have, I'm sure this has happened to you many a time.
It has. I think the fascinating thing about yesterday, Matthew, was that I checked the radar before I came in because, maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome at this point. I don't know. We just felt like this was going to happen because it always seems to. The radar in Charlotte was clean. And I was like, okay, this is great. So run the race. And whenever we go on, we go on. However, that cell popped up and, they had to delay and then they were going to do it and then they weren't. And so as per usual, NASCAR on a Sunday on a holiday weekend, just for whatever reason, it seems like Fox has just had a really bad run of luck with that over the decades.
Well, as we mentioned, today is Memorial Day. Special thank you. And today isn't about us or sports. Obviously, today is about remembering those who gave their lives, paid the ultimate sacrifice so we can sit here and talk about sports. So thank you to everybody who is in the military, has served, including your father. Is Memorial Day a special day for you and your family?
I don't know. Thankfully, I don't have anybody that was close to me that ever perished in war or died in the line of duty or in the line of service. So, for that, I'm infinitely grateful. But I always tell the story of my dad coming home to Vietnam. I was 3 or 4 at the time. And I remember physically it weighing on me seeing my dad really for the first time because he was gone pretty much by the time I was born. And then, to see him for the first time and that resonating, my mom's like, that's your dad. That's who that is. Like, okay, as only a 3 or 4-year-old, seemed like a pretty big deal.
Yeah,
it was.
Nice
and luckily I lucked out
right.
with, a real stud of a father. So, this day means a lot to a lot of people. And, unfortunately, because of what you said, right? There are a lot of soldiers that paid the ultimate price trying to defend the nation. So, this is a somber day for a lot of people.
I went to ASU, as we all have come to know, and obviously Pat Tillman's huge at ASU and in Phoenix, Arizona. So it's always a day for me, at least, to remember Pat Tillman and what he did and the sacrifice that he made and all that stuff.
Amen.
So it's but we're gonna talk about some sports today. Sadly, we're gonna talk about the Rangers and the Astros because they are bad. They're not good baseball teams right now, and they're gonna need a lot of help to rebound before the All-Star break. So we'll get into that. We're going to talk OTAs, Cowboys going into their second week. What's going to give us more confidence going into this year? What do we need to see from them? And then the Texans are the darling of the NFL right now. Popular, trendy Super Bowl pick.
Yeah.
Are we putting the cart before the horse when it comes to the second-year upstart Texans here? So we'll talk about all that. But first, as always, we start with the number game. There's a lot of good number 4s. 104, obviously, the number of the episode. So we're starting with 4. Brett Favre is the one I thought you would say.
And you would be right. We talked about this last time, right? The guy that made the number 4 cool, Brett Favre.
Well, Lou Gehrig's a good one, obviously, too, though. I would say that if someone owns the number 4, it would have to be like Lou Gehrig, just because of he was first, obviously. I think it was 27 to 39 or however long he played and wore the number 4. One of the first number 4s ever. So
I think that would mean more to me had I remembered watching Lou Gehrig play during his heyday, and so some of this is ageism, right? Wherever it was that we were at the time, what do we think of when we think of the name or the number 4?
Yeah, I think of Brett Favre.
Yeah, I do too.
He was my generation's Brett Favre, obviously. He was my generation's quarterback before Tom Brady started becoming what Tom Brady became.
Yeah, and I think, for me, there was a time, especially when I was younger, it's like, number 4, who would want that number, right? But after Brett Favre, then you see a lot of kids, no matter the sport, that wanted the number 4.
Charles Barkley wore number 4 there for a little while, too. I always find it interesting, the Charles Barkley conversation, because before he was what he is now, he was a great player that just never won a ring. And I don't think that those players that played in the Michael era ever get the credit that they deserve for being as great as they were.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to grow up in the Barkley era, and that boy was that a lot of fun. That NBA during that time, because I think we may have talked about this too before, was back then that league was growing, but it was growing because the superstars felt a need to help spread the brand. And so wherever they went, you could clown with those guys, you could have fun, you could do knockoff stories. They always felt like, for the most part, that this was something that they were all going to have to do in order to grow the sport, and they all did it. And I think today's player really owes a strong tip of the cap to a lot of those players that came up in the 90s.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss, I didn't put it on here, and I didn't clip the video for some reason. I don't know why I didn't do it, but the Memorial Day miracle 25 years ago today, Sean Elliott with his shoe this far off of the sideline, hitting the shot to win the game for the Spurs in the 99 run.
Yeah, and I was not at that game. I was by myself back here at the station. I remember when that happened, and I just remember the next time I saw him, and I, had a pretty good relationship with Sean, still do, although I haven't seen him in a while. I told him, I said, man, you must have had 2 ball boys. Take your what's off the set. I mean, off the court that day. I think it just like
yeah, the little Freudian slip there.
Yes. So he just said that was one of those feelings he had during the game, that it was, no matter what I threw up, I knew it was going in. And I mean, yeah, the toe tapping, the presence of mind to know exactly where the sideline was.
He almost dropped the ball was almost thrown out of bounds. Like, he had to basically take it off of someone's lap and then turn around. I mean, it was
unreal, surreal moment. And I think, that moment alone was like, holy cow, these guys might actually go win this thing. And of course they did.
Of course they did. That was the first one. And I saw that in the show last night. You're celebrating the 25 years since that first one.
Slowly but surely, we're going to go back into the archives and kind of reminisce about some of the stuff we were able to get in the build up to all this, because when it was 20 years, we did kind of a retrospective of that whole season. But to me, the build up of the finals and, the way that this team started to really galvanize itself, it had its flaws, but they were unbelievable working around what it was that they weren't good at and really accentuating what they were good at. Total team sport. Total team. And again, that was the one championship to me. It was like, wow, this is the stuff that happens in New York, Boston, and LA, not little San Antonio.
Yeah, we might have another championship coming soon with the San Antonio Brahmas.
Wouldn't that be something?
They look damn good. For our hockey friends, number 4, Bobby Orr, also, just FYI.
Right.
We do have Stanley Cups coming soon, so hopefully the Stars can make it and we can talk about them a little bit more. Also in 2004, the Patriots beat the Panthers 32-29. Tom Brady was the MVP. Pistons beat the Lakers. Sorry, Javier. 4-1. And the Red Sox swept the Cardinals and breaking the curse of the Bambino after they came back from 3 games down against the Yankees in the ALCS, which basically was the World Series. They shouldn't have even needed to play the World Series after that. That was their World Series, was beating the Yankees in 2004. So
the Panthers-Patriots Super Bowl, I think that might have been the first one that I ever went to, or the second one. I can't remember, but that was a lot of fun in the days building up to that Super Bowl. There were a couple of guys. Remember the guy that played in the old XFL, He Hate Me?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
yeah,
he was
yeah,
like
yeah.
the face of the league. Anyway, he was on that Panthers team, and gosh, that guy was funny. I don't remember his name, but he and a couple of other guys were doing bits in the middle of media day. And I was just riveted. They were talking about boa constrictors, having boa constrictors in their house, and the one almost killed them, and they had to get a fork, and they were doing this. It was, back in the day when you could, get away with darn near anything.
Side note, did you
Super Bowl media day?
Did you see that? I'm totally getting off the rails already. Haven't even gotten to our first subject yet. So, Jalen Phillips, the defensive end for the Dolphins right now, went into his bathroom and there was an iguana in his toilet.
Sweet.
Big ass iguana, like that big, in his toilet, and he was like, "What is going on?" That's the iguana's house now. Like if it was me, that's his. I'm moving out. That's it.
Yeah.
If there's a snake in my toilet, if there's an iguana, I can never crap in my own house ever again. I will never ever be
It's
able to
safer
do that.
Go outdoors.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
100%. I'm redoing all of the plumbing in the house at the very least. Like that is
Yeah,
not.
how does that happen?
I don't know. How does an iguana get in the toilet, and why are they in the toilet?
I'm not sure.
That's all I gotta say. Anyway, speaking of things in the toilet, Astros and Rangers.
Yeah.
That's a segue if I've ever heard one. The Astros and the Rangers are not good right now. Both teams are under 500, 3 and 4 games respectively under 500. They are both just ravaged with injuries right now. I haven't seen two teams be this much of a mash unit this early in the season in a while.
So there is good news, right? Some of these guys are going to return. In fact, most of these guys are going to return at some point. So there's going to be reinforcement. I think the best news of all, Matt, is that in that division, normally this is enough to bury you by the All-Star break, but the Astros and Rangers are right there, sort of near the top. They're lucky that the AL West this year is morphed into the NL Central.
Right.
And, it's why a lot of people still have hope. If you can just tread water for now, and then, the bad news is that probably only one team is coming out of that division this year, unless, a couple of teams get hot. But Seattle, with that starting pitching, they're going to be tough, but, they don't hit much. So it'll be interesting to see if and when either team can get healthy and which team is going to get hot and kind of seize control of this thing.
The Astros got pretty hot here in the last couple of weeks. They were in the cellar of the AL, and they somehow clawed their way out. I think they won 10 of 12 and then started falling on hard times again this past week. But when you look at the Rangers, I think they had lost 11 of their last 13 games, and they're now 3-4 games under 500, and no Bruce Bochy coached team has ever been under 500 and won the World Series that year. So you can pretty much chalk it and take it to the bank that the Rangers aren't winning the World Series. But that team, there's so many guys: Nathan Eovaldi, Wyatt Langford, Cody Bradford, John Gray, Josh Young, Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, Josh Sborz, Tyler Mahle. Like, so many guys are on the IL. I don't even know how they're fielding a team.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think it's fascinating, too, how much Josh means to that team in the middle of their lineup. And it's interesting when you see a team that's a really good offensive team and they lose a thumper in the offseason, maybe a guy that's underpaid, but somehow changes the dynamic of the whole entire lineup when he's in there. And Nelson Cruz comes to mind, right? And that's why you always saw him. He would pop up, and he would always pop up, and those teams would do pretty well because you have to pitch differently when you've got a guy that can just absolutely change the game with one swing of the bat in the middle of the lineup. And I think Josh looked like he was going to be that guy with the start that he was off to this year. Not having him in the lineup this year has really affected how teams can attack the Rangers. And if you get past Simeon and the shortstop, why am I drawing blanks? Corey Seager. If you can get past those two guys, then all of a sudden it's like you can, breathe a little bit.
Yeah, Adolis Garcia is not hitting very well this year. He's just, I don't know what's wrong with him, but he is not performing well. Seager and Simeon also aren't having Seager and Simeon type seasons. So, and their pitching's just been bad. I mean, they're 18th in ERA, they're 17th in WHIP. It's a recipe for disaster, especially when your bullpen sucks.
Yeah, and when you said Garcia, the thing I think of is, again, that's a guy that probably benefits having Josh in the lineup. Right? I mean, it just makes it tougher to pitch 1 through 9 when you've got at least 4 guys that can hit like those 4 guys can.
And for the Astros, I mean, Kyle Tucker is doing his thing. He's got 18 homers, 39 ribbies, and he's basically their whole offense at this point. They're doing really well when it comes to the average portion, but they're not hitting for a lot of power. Yordan Alvarez is having a really down year when you expect him to be that, Nelson Cruz type bat in the middle of your lineup. He only has 9 homers. I think it's 20 some odd RBIs this year. And then their pitching staff is just horrible right now. I mean, when you have Framber Valdez getting lit up every 5th day almost, and then you have Jose Urquidy and Lance McCullers and Kendall Graveman and Luis Garcia all on the IL, it's tough. I think their ERA is 26th in the league. I mean, it's bad.
And remember last year and the year before too, when they won it, this was a team built on pitching, right? Starting pitching, elite bullpen, elite middle guys. And so that team that won 2 years ago did it differently than the first championship that, slugged. They had good pitchers too, obviously, but it was more of an offensive-minded team. So if you don't have either one of those, a team that slugs and a team that can get you out on the mound, makes it difficult to win. But again, the best news is that neither team, the Rangers or the Astros, is buried, and there's still a lot of baseball left.
There is. But when you look at, the pitching staff right now for the Astros, if your best pitcher is Justin Verlander at 41 years old, 40 years old, and then your second best pitcher in terms of ERA is Ronel Blanco, who had only made 2 starts before this year. I don't know if that's a winning strategy.
Well, for them too, they would every year it seemed like there would be somebody that came out of the woodwork, talking about the Astros, that would all of a sudden start hamming and egging it with the rest of the guys, and it was somebody that you never really thought of.
Mm-hmm.
Blanco, think about if they would have just been healthy and all of a sudden you add a guy out of nowhere like that. So again, Blanco's one of the guys that's keeping them in there right now.
Yeah, it doesn't help that JP France and Hunter Brown, it seem like they've never thrown a baseball in their lives right now. They're getting hammered almost every time out. So that's bad. If I was to tell you right now, one of these teams was going to turn it around, go on a run, and make the playoffs, who would you feel more confident in saying?
Wow, that's a really tough one to answer without having pondered it too much. I guess because of the history recently with the Astros, it would be them. But again, I guess it's probably whoever gets healthier quickest. And it might be both of them at the end when you get right down to it. Again, the fact that they're within 4 games of first place as we sit here, not even at the halfway point, it's pretty cool.
It is a little concerning though, 50 some odd games in, that this is what they're looking at. They're both under 500, and not by a little.
And especially, you're right, you mentioned Bochy, right? Every single year that he's won it, the next year they were under 500. So, the Rangers, if you go by that, that's a lot to overcome.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with you. We've just seen it too many times where the Astros maybe start off a little slow and then they go win 30 out of the next 40, and then they're right back in this thing. So I would have a little bit more faith in the Astros than I would the Rangers, but the Rangers have shown that they can do it too. Obviously, they won the World Series last year. So
we got a comment from Tom Guerrero. He says the Rangers, he feels are a little tired, maybe a little hangover from the World Series because they played so many games last year. He just said it takes a toll on your health.
And you'll hear, this is Chris Hoffman, not Bob Gamber. Bob Gamber taking Memorial Day off. Slacker over here. But I think that's fair. And they do seem a little tired. It was like they gave everything for one run.
This is the one thing that Corey Seager did remind the entire team of going into the season, which is there could be a hangover, and if you don't treat the beginning of the season like you were playing Game 7, then these kinds of things can happen. But again, at some point, the numbers catch up to you. You just read the litany of guys that are on the IR. I mean, there's a reason why they're struggling.
They need some guys healthy and fast.
And last comment here from Jim Hare. Astros still picked to win their division, and they're climbing up from the bottom, so nothing would surprise me. So I guess he's picking.
I agree. Nothing. They don't surprise me at this point anymore. We've seen it too many times.
Too many shock and awe moments for them.
Exactly. Like last year, we looked at them and we're like, the Astros might not win the AL East or AL West, excuse me. Sure enough, right at the end,
one game from going back to another World Series.
Exactly. I mean, they've done it so many times. I'm not going to doubt them at this point. So let's get to the Cowboys real quick. Cowboys OTA starting again this week. Micah Parsons is supposed to show up this time. We saw a lot and heard a lot from Dak and from Mike McCarthy last week. I was interested to hear all the stuff that they said about Trey Lance. There was a lot of questions about Trey Lance, and he's probably going to get most of the work in the preseason. He's probably going to get most of the work through OTAs. They're trying to get him more reps. I find it eternally interesting that the most talked about player is their third string quarterback right now, besides the guys that aren't there.
Well, I do too in some ways, but I mean, it makes sense. You got to have something to talk about this time of year. And there are a lot of unknowns, obviously. I don't think anybody is going to deny what Trey Lance's talent is in terms of being an athlete. Can he play quarterback at the NFL level? I remember that one game he had in the rain against the Bears. He was pretty damn good, so there's a lot of there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and what better time than to do it this time of year. And the fact of the matter is that Trey Lance is going to be a free agent, so the Cowboys are going to do him a bit of service here, kind of giving him the keys to the car this time of year, because they know what they've got. in the other two quarterbacks, right? So
what do you want to see and hear from the Cowboys this week as they go through their second session of OTAs?
I don't know. To me, I want to see that there's a lot of growth on the offensive line. And I know that sounds silly because we're so new into this offseason, but the fact that they're going to be going into the new year potentially with a rookie center who hasn't played center, and then another rookie, yes. And so I think that to me right now is the biggest point of where my attention would go.
I think everyone's saying the right things. What I want to see is Jalen Tolbert and Jonathan Brooks see someone take over that number 3. Because Brandon Cooks is obviously your number 2. CD's obviously your number 1. And I don't think there's any indication that he's going to hold out during the season. They'll probably get a deal done in August like they tend to do with the Cowboys. But I want to see which one of those 2 guys is going to be the number 3. Michael Gallup could not do it. They didn't, and they were behind him waiting for that chance. Now that Gallup's gone, it clears your shot. One of you have to come in and seize that moment. And it sounds like it's going to be Jalen Tolbert.
He's a guy that I'm really rooting for because I remember this time last year being in the clubhouse and he was sitting by himself and he was almost like the pariah on the team because his rookie year, he didn't get on the field much. And I think by his own accounts, there was a lot that he had to learn in order to get on the field. But even in talking to him, he was very honest and forthright about where he was a year ago. But he felt like he made a lot of leaps during the off months to get better. And I think that showed. I mean, his confidence level between year 1 and year 2, I think, went up. And I think that's part of the reason why Gallup is no longer here because you've got a guy under a rookie contract. Again, he's one of those guys I'm pulling for. He seems like a very sturdy young guy that got a lot of tough lessons early with a lot heaped on him. Hey, we drafted this guy here. He's supposed to come in and contribute right away. It didn't work out that way, but I get the feeling that the book is not written yet on Jalen Tolbert.
I would say the other thing I'm looking for, and we saw a lot this past week, is Mozzie Smith, and everyone's so concerned about his weight. You hear all the questions. What's the correct playing weight for him? What weight are you trying to get him out? What even questions to him of, are you concerned? What are you trying to play at? It seems like, and we didn't hear too much about this last year, that his conditioning and his weight issue is one of the key problems that key reasons that he did not get on the field last season.
There's a lot of room for growth there too.
I think there needs to be less room. I think is what I think everyone's trying to ask.
Yeah. I mean, and again, we're getting to the point where, usually year 1 is a grace period for a lot of rookies, but at some point, like Bill Parcells used to say, at some point I got to see it.
Yeah.
And so, it's either going to happen or it's not. But, my faith is in the Cowboys coaching staff that they're going to get to wherever they need to get to. And then also Mozzie too. I think he's going to do what he needs to do in order to become a good player in the league.
All right, let's talk about the Texans here. They are just the darling of the NFL right now. They are being picked to win conference championships. They're being picked to knock off the Chiefs from the top of the perch. They're being picked to win this division for the next 10 years. Their favorites week 1 at Indianapolis. Why? Like we saw, they went 10-7 last year. They didn't go 15-2. And yes, they picked up Stephon Diggs. They picked up Danielle Hunter. They picked up Derek Barnett. They re-signed Noah Brown. They made a lot of good moves. They re-signed Dalton Schultz, who's going to take his leadership role. Dalton Schultz is talking so much about C.J. Stroud and C.J. Stroud being a leader, but are we putting too much on this team right now?
I don't think so because, look at the names that you just rattled off, and these were guys that they've added to this team. Danielle Hunter's got a lot of skins on the wall, man. He's a sneaky, good defensive end, sturdy. I know he's a little long in the tooth by NFL standards, but that's a guy you for sure want on your team. And same thing with Azeez Al-Sha'ar. That's another guy that, he played very well in San Francisco. He played last year in Tennessee, and he's got time spent with the head coach when they were in San Francisco. I think these are sneaky little pieces that you add to a team that you think can get you over the top. And a lot of people would like to have some of these guys that they signed. So given what they did last year with essentially a rookie quarterback and a bunch of unanswered questions, Now you're starting to fill in and take in, some of these other pieces from other places. You might be onto something. Then you pay a guy like the former Cowboys, right? Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz.
To your
they look scary.
To your point, I like how they're built. They built from the inside out. Their offensive line with Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil and all those guys, they built that first. And their center's name is Juice, which I love. They built there, and then they traded for Stephon Diggs, and they put him on a one-year deal. They basically redid his contract and was like, all right, you're going to be a free agent this offseason. We both know what we want in this, We both know you want another contract in this offseason. We both know that we want you to perform like you need another contract. So let's call a spade a spade. Let's redo your deal. Let's have this be a one-year thing. I love that they did that because it makes sure that you're going to get the most out of Stephon Diggs and he's going to be invested. I love that Danielle Hunter is only a 2-year contract because you have Will Anderson in 2 years that you're probably going to have to pay. So I like the way that they're organizing this team. I do think that we're putting too much pressure on them, though. We've seen sophomore slumps from head coaches. Look at Brian Dable last year. Yeah, they went to the playoffs. The Giants did the year before. Last year they were a freaking dumpster fire. Yes, they don't have C.J. Stroud. I get that, but we've seen sophomore years of head coaches and quarterbacks and offensive coordinators go badly, and they barely won the division last year because of a Jaguars team that fell flat on their face. Because the Colts running back dropped that fourth down ball from Gardner Minshew, and they ended up losing that game. Colts ended up losing that game. A lot of things broke right for them.
Yes.
So I could see things not breaking as right for them this year, and things maybe not coming down in a heap. But an 8-9 season, a 7-10 season, that's not out of the realm of possibility for me, and I think we're crowning them a little too soon.
I think that's fair, but we're spitballing because that's the time of the year to do it. And you're right, there are going to be some things that they have to overcome. Playing a winner's schedule this year is going to be very difficult. Playing a schedule like they have to, where you're playing a game on a Wednesday and you're not used to primetime games. All that is a learning curve. But they've got, I think, a really good head coach in terms of a guy that's been there, done that. He's going to know when to put his foot on the gas, when not to put his foot on the gas. Again, they drafted well, too. They didn't have a first-round pick, but the two guys that they got in the second round, there's a good chance both of those guys are going to start. I don't know. I just don't know how, as we sit here today, given the fact that everybody's healthy, as we sit here today, how they can't be the talk of the NFL.
Agreed. And I will pick them to win the division. I'm just saying that there's a lot of things that can and do go wrong with these things all the time. The Jaguars could very easily be a much better team than they were last year. Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence could easily be significantly improved.
The Colts too.
I think the Colts are a very good team, especially with Anthony Richardson being healthy now. Yep. Shane Steichen is a very good head coach, and so I think that's just not a division where you say, all right, the Texans win. It's not going to be that easy.
You're right. I don't think it's that cut and dry, but it's going to be a lot of fun to see that division and how it plays out.
Well, this is actually a question for me, but I'm looking at them almost like the Buffalo Bills a few years ago. Remember, they were the league's darling, and everybody was heaping it because they got so close to Kansas City, and they're just got to take the next step. And I'm hoping, now they're falling back. It looks like they're just one step away from a rebuild. Hopefully, we're not putting too much expectations too soon on this Texan team.
Yeah,
but this is what you want, right? You don't want to be where the Texans have been the last half decade, where it's like, they're an afterthought. Now they're part of the conversation. I'm glad that that's the case. It gives us something else to talk about.
I agree. And the Texans, they have their history, but I don't know. There's something about crowning a team this early that they are going to be favored in almost every game. They're going to be the talk of the town next year because of C.J. Stroud and because of Tank Dell, who thankfully did not get that hurt from the gunshot wound. He's already back on the practice field, which is great to hear and great to see. The Noah Browns and I'm forgetting their other receiver.
12.
Yeah.
Collins.
Nico Collins. Thank you. I don't know why his name was escaping
That's
me.
okay. I did Corey Seager earlier.
Yeah. But I think that they're going to be a very good team. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be a really good team. I just think that we might need to pump the brakes a little bit. Like if they lose 3 out of their first 5, I'm not going to be sitting here, panicking, because I don't think that's unexpected of them. So, last thing on the way out, about an hour and a half ago, it was released by the NBA that Bill Walton passed away at the age of 71 after a prolonged battle with cancer. Bill Walton's one of those guys he is absolutely one of one. He's an NBA might have been the best college basketball player of all time, at least in the conversation. And he would have been one of the best NBA players of all time, if not for significant foot injuries that hampered his career as a big 7-footer in the 70s. So, to honor him, I put together 2 of my favorite clips of Bill Walton and his legendary announcing career. So let's hear those real quick. It's so good. He did it. I think I'm glad that the Pac-12 is gone now too, because the Pac-12 after dark is not the same. It would never be the same without Bill Walton. He did so many Pac-12 games. I'm an ASU guy. I've watched him more, and Dave Pash, who apparently they don't know each other's names, are more the times than I can count. It's not going to be the same without Bill Walton.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember Bill as a player, and I mean, that guy at some point was a pariah. He was the guy that goes, he's a bust. He was drafted. He was this. He was that. Lucky he's nothing in the NBA because of the injuries. But because he was such a tour de force and a force of nature, eventually those good vibrations that he puts out just wins everybody over. And, you thought less of him as a player as you did of just a guy that was spreading good cheer across the sports universe. I mean, what a phenomenal broadcast talent, and by all accounts, a good dude. I can't say I've ever had any any like experiences with him, unfortunately, but just the kind of guy that you get juice from.
I had the chance to meet Bill Walton. A lot of the ASU students did, because they did so many Arizona State games, Arizona State basketball games. So he was a staple in the Phoenix community, and it was in the Tempe community, excuse me. But it was just, he's what you see is what you get. Like, he is exactly what he is on TV at all times. Very nice, very tall, just super out there and weird, like your kooky grandpa that you're like, okay, let's go this way, Grandpa. It's okay. But it's just his innate personality. And it was just it was sad. I didn't know that he was this ill. And so when I saw that pop up, I was like, I can't not add some of Bill Walton's best hits in here. So,
yeah, well done. I mean, he's one of those rare guys too, that, like you said, what you see is what you get. But how do you translate that through a television screen? How do you pass along that positive energy to other people through a viewing monitor? And like Dickie V, man, those guys just have a way about them. You feel better listening to them or just watching them interact with others.
Him and Dave Pash were just so funny together, because Dave was just like, let's talk about the game, and and Bill won't want to talk about anything but the basketball that was happening on the court. So it was great. I saw the clip today, that of him eating the cupcake that was still lit, and he ate the candle while it was on fire. And Dave was just like, I was kidding. Oh God, I should have clipped that one. I didn't end up doing it, but anyway, rest in peace, Bill Walton.
Amen.
ASU basketball.
Life well lived.
ASU basketball will never be the same. Anyway, that's all we got for you on today's Sneakers and Cleats podcast. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe, use 5-star rating, tell a friend, tell an enemy. We'll be back here on Thursday, and thank you once again, to all of the armed forces members who have paid the ultimate price, we should remember you every day, but especially today on Memorial Day. So you will never be forgotten. And until then, everyone, have a good week.